Mike Neese is an amazing environmental advocate, an environmentalist, an outdoorsman, a businessman. And in fact, the whole reason why the New Mexico Green Amendment movement got started was because of Mike Neese. Mike Neese heard me on a podcast one day or a radio show, and he picked up the phone and he called me. And he said, I want to get a New Mexico Green Amendment passed. Can you help me? And we were off to the races. And we immediately started to work together to identify community leaders and political leaders that we should start to talk to explore the power and importance of this idea for the people of New Mexico. So he's the whole reason why we have a New Mexico Green Amendment movement happening right now today. And, Mike's passionate voice for the environment, his deep-held conviction in the importance of environmental protection, I think really shined through from his conversation. It certainly drew me to want to come to the state of New Mexico right away. So I hope it will draw all of you to want to join our New Mexico Green Amendment movement.
Awesome.
So, Mike, for the peoples, can you please tell us who you are, full name, and any affiliations or anything about yourself that you want us to know and that we should know in terms of you and environmental protection efforts?
My name is Mike Neese. I live in Placitas, New Mexico. I spend most of my time outdoors now and pretty much all of my life, and out of the city limits also. I'm a member of probably 20 different environmental groups, all of the big ones and many of the smaller ones that do a lot of the important environmental work around New Mexico.
So about when in your life and why did you get involved with environmental issues and environmental protection work?
I was a kayaker almost all my life, definitely the greater part of my life, and so I spent a lot of time on the rivers of New Mexico and Colorado and even South America and around the Southwest. And I did the really hard stuff. I did the easy stuff with my wife, but when you're on the river, you do have time to look and see and to understand that things are changing. Even in a 20-year period, a river can change tremendously from what it was to what it is now. And so I always said that when I'm done riding these rapids, then I'm going to be more involved with actually the management of the water. I'm mostly involved with water issues.
So in terms of your environmental volunteerism and work and advocacy, what are the priority issues in terms of environmental protection that you have, that have risen to the top for you and therefore you spend your time working on?
I spend my time working on water issues and pretty much everything that's concerned with water here in New Mexico. We don't have a lot of water here in New Mexico, and we have certain industries that don't respect our water and don't respect the people that need that water, including the future people that will need that water. And they actually destroy the water. The water in New Mexico is actually owned by the public. And there's this unwritten law, moral law, I would think, that they're going to use the water and then return the water. Well, for example, with oil and gas, that's not what's happening. oil and gas with the fracking process is take clean water, make it into a toxic waste, and then dispose of it 2 miles deep, never to be used by the people who lent it to that industry in the first place. It was a loan, and they stole it. And not only did they steal it, they contaminated it so badly that if it ever comes back up, then it can't be used for anything that results in human consumption. And yet, in this day and age, and in New Mexico, the Produced Water Act allowed produced water to be used for agriculture. And so, if that's the case, it the stuff that's in that produced water will be in the human body. And so we can't allow this anymore. We got to stop. The people of New Mexico, and I think the people of the United States, are well aware that, there's a fine line between economic development and the degradation that comes about because of the different industry technologies, but we're well past the point of diminishing returns. And we all know that this can't go any further.
It was over a year and a half ago. I actually think it was winter time, the beginning of 2019. That's what I'm thinking. And you heard me on a radio show talking about the Green Amendment, and you called. Why did you call me?
I called you regarding the Green Amendment, first of all, because you were so good and so well spoken on a topic that I was only starting to understand. Laws these days are made in a way that oftentimes are meant to make a public, to placate the public, to make them feel good. Oftentimes they're not well researched, they're not well written, and they don't do what the people might have thought and hoped that they would do. We need, as we go forward, better laws. I was at the point where I was just learning that good laws don't pass. I would watch good bills in the legislature be defeated by the people that I voted for, or the people like me voted for. And that wasn't right. The Green Amendment's going to face that too. But we just need better laws, better thought out laws, better written laws, and better laws that can actually affect the changes that we need to make.
When you think about the environment and natural resources here in New Mexico, and you think about New Mexico's laws, and you've spoken to it, but I'm going to ask you very directly, do you think that New Mexico's laws, the laws that are on the books, and both as they're written and the way they're implemented, are up to the task of properly protecting the water, the air, the climate, and the natural resources of New Mexico for present and future generations?
The laws of New Mexico are not anywhere near adequate in protecting the people and the environment, all aspects of the environment of New Mexico and most other states. The reality is that I believe, as you, and that if we had a powerful law in the state constitution, we would have a better chance in the courts. But right now, we can't even get through the courts. What we had in as far as environmental protections in the state constitution, what we have now hasn't been able to do any good in the courts. It's only been tried one time that I know of on methane, which is such an egregious violation of our environment and our people's rights, or the rights that we should have to clean air and a healthy climate, and yet it failed. And so we need laws that will not fail us.
Do you think that people who live here in New Mexico have a belief right now that they actually have a right to clean water and clean air?
I believe we have a right to clean water and clean air. I don't think the courts believe that. And so we need to make that change. We need to make sure that the courts and our lawmakers believe that we have a right to clean air and clean water and a clean environment.
So you've spoken a little bit about this, but let's just touch on it a little bit more. Article 20, Section 21, that's currently in the New Mexico Constitution. You've talked about how it's failed in the courts. Have you ever tried to use Article 20, Section 21 in your own environmental advocacy to make a point?
Yes, I did, and that's when I first, not too long after I started relying on the Article 20, Section 21, that I met you, and that's when I realized, well, I need to do more research on, and I like research, so I went back and I researched the law was made in 1971, and that was a good time. That was much like what we've got now, in a lot of ways. I mean, Earth Day and DDT, California condors, and Greenpeace, and a lot more. So I researched, and in studying how it actually went through the legislature in 1971, I realized, even in 1971, they realized that this was a feel-good bill. This wasn't going to do anything, and people even said it at the time. If you want this to do what you say you want it to do, you need to word it differently, and they didn't. And so the result was it never even surfaced until I think it was 2015 on the methane case. Wild Earth Guardians brought suit against the governor. And, that's on methane. The release of methane, and our laws say waste prohibited. The New Mexico state statute against waste prohibited is clear in the definition of waste. And methane is waste. And yet they're wasting it. And in my opinion, they owe us not only for what they've done to our environment, for all that methane. That's ours. It belongs to the public, and they wasted it. They just threw it away, and they didn't pay us a penny for it. But the price is ours. The cost is ours. We're going to pay big for a lot of things, and so we need to, like I say, get better, make better laws, and hopefully stop the nonsense and the craziness of pollution One of the big things that's going to hit New Mexico in the near future is what I call the walkaway Joes. The oil and gas industry is having trouble financially now. They are going to walk away from New Mexico, and they're going to abandon all their sites and all their wells. Who's going to pay that cleanup? New Mexico and our legislature has been taking money from these people when we should have been banking that money all along for the walkaway Joes. They're going to walk away, and we don't have any money to pay for it. We're going to pay the price, big. And they'll be gone. They take their profits and they move on. And it happens in industry after industry. I worked for United Nuclear out at Church Rock in 1979. United Nuclear walked away. And the uranium industry walked away. And Church Rock in 1979 was the location of one of the biggest radiation disasters in U.S. history, bigger than 3 Mile Island. But it affected the Navajo people. Not all the people, the white population that lived near 3 Mile Island. And so you've probably, or many people who may see this, have never heard of Church Rock.
So, perfect segue. Can you tell us about what happened at Church Rock? What led up to it? What happened? What was the walkaway? And what's the legacy that's been left behind?
Yeah, the United Nuclear and a lot of other companies came to New Mexico, and there's an area out in New Mexico towards Grants that was very rich in uranium. And nuclear was big. And the cost of uranium and the value of uranium was out from the United States was such that they could make a lot of money. So I worked for a company, United Nuclear, and United Nuclear, they had a mine and a mill at Church Rock on the Navajo reservation. And I believe it was June or July of 1979, their tailings dam burst. And it released, I don't even remember how much, millions of gallons of toxic waste down a little, basically an arroyo called the Rio Puerco. And it went all the way to the Arizona line. That it was so much water, and then it soaked in to the ground. The cleanup was marginal. This is 1979. Cleanups were not performed properly. United Nuclear was allowed basically to do their own cleanup. It became a Superfund site, and as I recall, United Nuclear was put in charge of cleaning up their own Superfund site. So they collected money for their investors, not only on creating a toxic mess, but cleaning up poorly, because these messes can't be cleaned up. I mean, cleanup no, it can't be done. I'm an angry old white guy, and I could leave. I wasn't then. I was in my 20s then, mid-20s. And, but I could leave, and I could go back to Albuquerque, where I lived at the time. But the people who actually lived out there, the Navajos, they couldn't leave. They didn't want to leave. They didn't leave. And their water and their land was destroyed. They can't drink the water. They can't grow anything on the land. The profits were realized for the investors back east or wherever they lived, but the cleanup has still not been done. That's another one of those legacies that we have to live with and we still have to pay for, and yet it can't be done. Once we do that, we can't clean it up. So United Nuclear walked away. And the whole industry walked away with their profits, but didn't clean up their messes. They'll tell you a lot of different things. They'll tell you that, first of all, we're not polluting, and we'll clean whatever mess we make up. No, they won't. And we know that, and we knew it then, but we hear them, and we want our politicians, and even our people, know that they're paying good money for the people that work out there. Yeah, a lot of those people that worked out at United Nuclear are dead now because of what they were exposed to. So they paid the price. The taxpayers paid the price with compensation acts. Look up compensation acts. Compensation acts, there's all kinds of them. But the government pays people that were affected by a certain industry or a certain technology at a certain time. And here in New Mexico, there are several compensation acts that are paying different people, usually the survivors of people that died. The compensation acts are paid for by the public, not the industry that created the need.
So, so you still have this legacy of contamination out there. Has the state, and understanding that it was under federal Superfund law, and understanding that that's who was overseeing what the industry was or was not doing. But the reality is, there's still a contaminated condition out there. Has the state done anything? Now, it is on Navajo land, so maybe they don't want it because of their sovereignty. I don't know if you have that much detail, but is there a role for the state in offering help to clean that up, or at this point is that not an option because of the location of the property? Do you know?
Well, when we're talking about the state, if we're talking about the state as a governing body,
Yeah.
That's one thing. But we also have to talk about the state as a people, because the people in some ways benefited from the industry, in this case the nuclear industry that was here. There were good jobs. In 1979, I was making approximately $16 an hour with as much overtime as I wanted at time and a half and then double time. And I was a young man, and I was banking all that money. So it was a great thing. And the state of New Mexico was collecting taxes on that. But it was on Navajo land, and a lot of times on federal lands too. Not so much on state lands. But as a people, and as the state of New Mexico, we have an obligation to be, in my opinion, better educated. I was a sleepyhead, and I think most people used to be sleepyheads. I'm not a sleepyhead anymore. I pay attention to anything that's coming down the pike, and I want to know what the possibilities are. And I think that's what we're talking about. What are the possibilities for the future? And how will the laws going forward affect that future? We didn't have those laws in place back then. We're paying the price. The Navajo people, not just Navajos. Anybody who worked out there, like me, we're paying the price. And we have to do better. Like I say, going forward, we're past the point of diminishing returns, and I think most of the people know that. I think most of our politicians know that. So the time is right now for laws precautionary laws that will protect the people, not just now, but for the future, but protect our air and our water and our land.
What do you hope to see as a green amendment is passed and then advanced? What kind of changes do you hope to see here in New Mexico?
A green amendment in New Mexico, the process itself, I think, the educational process of a green amendment going through the legislature is going to be so important. Hopefully it will pass, and especially if it passes, we will have a better informed public because of the process. We have a chance to educate the people. And right now, the people want to be educated like no other time that I've ever known. The people want to be educated. And so they're listening. Well, what can we do? Well, how can we do this? And what will this do for us? They're going to know. The Green Amendment is one of the precautionary laws that I think we absolutely need in order to educate the people, but also to protect our environment going forward, because the bureaucrats will then have to understand that they have a New Mexico constitutional requirement to pay attention and to proceed with caution with how they are going to permit a certain activity. Most people think that when we're talking about permit, it's just a piece of paper called a permit. I have a permit to do this, and so I'm going to do it. And you can't do anything about it because I've already gone through the process. But the bureaucrats need to understand, and our legislators and all our elected officials need to understand that the permit is actually, they are permitting an activity that has so much potential, and too oftentimes the potential is realized to destroy the water and the air and the climate of us now and our futures and our future generations. And so I have great hope for not only the Green Amendment, but for precautionary laws going forward.
What will you say to the people? There are people who are going to oppose the Green Amendment, as you've indicated. One of the arguments is going to be that it's not appropriate to put a right to clean water and clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments in the Bill of Rights section of our state constitution. That's not the place to put it. We have laws, we have regulations, that's the way to do it. But it doesn't belong beside the right to free speech or freedom of religion or, other civil, human, or political rights.
I think that we do have a right to clean air and clean water. I think the time is long past that we've allowed economic development to continue to destroy. We can't allow that anymore. We realize now what we did wrong. And yeah, we need economic development, but we can no longer allow economic development to rule sane decisions with regard to our environment and our futures. We can't be sick just because we wanted to make money. That's a no-brainer. And I think that most of the people in New Mexico, a majority of the people, and a majority of the people in the United States understand that now. We've gone too far. We can't go back. We cannot do business as usual anymore. Those times are gone, and it's got to stop.
And so that was beautiful. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, or anything that you haven't said, any story, any thought, any message that you'd like to take now to share to make sure that we capture it?
I'll just say a little bit on produced water. Produced water, New Mexico in 2019 passed a crazy Produced Water Act where they combined two bills and made it one, and they passed it in the 11th hour, in the dead of night, and there were some really bad portions of this bill. There were some really good things in this bill. The bill, I believe, should have been passed with some major changes. The fact that the bill allows for produced water to be used in agriculture, that was pushed by the oil and gas industry. So the oil and gas industry had a plan to capitalize off of produced water in a lot of different ways. They would no longer have to pump it 2 miles deep. They could release it into streams and riverbeds. And the city of Albuquerque, or the Water Utility Authority, which is water to Bernalillo County, the largest population in New Mexico, they get 66% of their water from the surface. And then they inject some of that water into, for future, they call it water banking, they inject it into the aquifer. So if we've contaminated the surface water, then we are also going to contaminate the aquifer. We are also going to contaminate our bodies. This is insanity that the oil and gas industry, because of their power, pushed off on us, and that has got to change. We need to change the Produced Water Act, and the oil and gas industry can no longer use any fresh water. If they're expecting us to use recycled toxic wastewater that they produced water, in our agriculture, in our rivers and streams, then why are we allowing, and why does the Produced Water Act still allow them to use fresh water for their processes? Those two things absolutely have to change, along with the liability should go to the people who pumped it out of the ground, not to the trucking firm who's eventually holding it, the last man standing, holding it, and a spill happens. It's from a trucking firm. The liability should be with the entire industry and not with the people in the future.